Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Cool People, Big Ideas. My guest today is one of my former teachers. Her name is Ellen Meredith, and she has been a teacher in Donna Eden's school. And that's where I first met her when I was going through Donna's program. And she's written several books, all of which I've read. I've interviewed her before on summits, and I've worked with her one on one, and she is remarkable. She is an incredible listener, an incredible teacher, an incredible healer, and an incredible storyteller. She's also infectiously joyful. And so it's always a joy speaking with her. And I think you're really going to enjoy this podcast. We're talking about her new book, which is about storytelling. And it's just lovely to speak with Ellen. And I hope that you enjoy this as much as I did. So sit back, relax, and take it all in. Hi, Ellen Meredith. Welcome so much to Cool People, Big Ideas. It's so lovely to see you.
Oh, it's great to see you, Lauren. I always love talking with you. So thanks for inviting me.
Oh, well, that is mutual. I love talking with you too. And it's been a while, and such a long while that you have published a new book since last we spoke. So you've been really busy at work. Do you want to hold it up for everyone to see? This
I
book.
do. It's my new baby. It's called Your Body Lives Your Story, Energy Medicine to Heal Your Story Maker.
It's so beautiful. And your writing is so wonderful. Like I just fully enjoy just the reading of it, the stories that you tell, and how you weave in, especially in this book, the challenges that we are going through right now globally. And you start the book right there, like we're in a tough spot. This is what's going on. I don't Nobody knows what to believe anymore, and you just grabbed me right from the beginning because I'm like, this is exactly what I'm feeling. This is exactly what I'm thinking. And then I'm like, and I don't know the answers. Maybe Ellen has the answers. So you really grabbed me right away with that storytelling. And of course, the story maker and telling your story is what this book is about. So I wonder, just to start us off, you break us
Mhm.
into, we're three parts. We have our story maker, we have our gatekeeper, and we have our, I love this, our radiance. Oh, I've never heard that before. It's like, yeah, it's is it soul? We don't know. We're going to ask you. So, could you just kind of bring us in and tell us what are these three parts of ourselves, and then we'll dive deeper into the story part of it.
Okay, well, these three parts, I call them mechanisms. And I should preface this by saying that I was trained by my inner teachers, and it's been a 50-year relationship process. And so most of the configurations that I'm presenting in this book and that I'm talking about are teachings that I received from them. And sometimes it's even their language or, collaborative language. So they call them mechanisms. And radiance is basically your soul juice, right? It's whatever you want to call that spirit, that essence that makes you you. And your story maker is the mechanism that we use to bring elements together to create an identity, to create a story, to frame our lives. We know that intuitively, like we're living a story. And, when I say, tell me about yourself, you're telling me parts of that story that you're putting together, that you're constantly creating, writing, etc. And so the story maker is our meaning maker. It's what creates meaning out of random experiences. And it's doing a lot of selecting, etc. The gatekeeper is the mechanism that we use to protect and preserve those stories and even to store them. So, so we've got this soul impulse that comes in to express itself, and it has these two mechanisms to do that. One is the story maker that weaves things together, and then the gatekeeper to protect that. This is my story. This is not my story. This is my identity. This is not me. This is your story, not my story. And so all that protective stuff, that gatekeeping that sometimes happens um, outside our our personal will, like, we find ourselves in reactivity without deciding to be there. That's your gatekeeper going off and doing its job. It's like an immune system for your body, mind, spirit, and everything, all of your being, and emotions. So I talk about both of these, all three of these in the book, and they weave together. However, this book, the star of this book, is the story maker, because this is about the fourth book in this series that I've written, and I've never focused a book just on, well, what is this story maker? How does it work? And how can we take care of it? How
Mm.
can we evolve it to handle what's happening today?
Beautiful. That was perfect. That's such a beautiful way of, I love the radiance, the soul drops in, and then there's these two sort of streams. And I want to, I understand, and you write a lot about where these teachings came from for you. And you just mentioned your counsel, and you talk about some other teachers in the book, which is so lovely. We'll get to later. But you and I met through Donna Eden, and you were
Yes.
a faculty in her school when I was going through her program. And so we're both very steeped in the Eden method and the energy work that Donna has brought to the world. And both of us have taken that work and sort of gone off on our own and then written our own books and our own schools of thought about that work. And yet we always kind of come
Right.
back to Donna the Well. We call her the mothership. So
Yeah, I
what?
do too,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, she's the mothership. So I was trying, and you write about her. Obviously, she's woven into the book as well. And there's certain techniques that you say these come right from Donna, and then others that these come from your counsels. So I was tracking that and thinking, okay, just to get it into a language that I'm steeped in, I was thinking the gatekeeper is somewhat equivalent to triple warmer, that fight, fight, or flee,
Yes.
free, free. Yeah, yeah, so I'm correct in that. Okay. So the
Yes,
radiance is
it's the system, the triple warmer
the
system, not
system.
just the meridian.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for saying that. Yes, the whole system of triple warmer. Um, which
Hmm.
maybe we'll have you on one time to talk about each of these systems, but just for now, the fight, fight, or flees, freeze, the habit field, these are the things that this is in control of. The immune system, who am I, who
Yes.
are you? But I couldn't think at first. I thought, well, is the story maker triple warmer? Is there any corollary of story maker in Donna's work?
Yes, absolutely. And you probably don't know it because it's very undertaught. You can find some of it in her book. And I want to say that although the gatekeeper is equivalent to triple warmer system, I've been writing and teaching about the gatekeeper for 40 years. So when I saw the triple warmer system, I thought, aha, that's
Yeah,
gatekeeper.
yeah.
And I continued to use both, but not interchangeably, because I think the gatekeeper is larger than
Mm,
the triple warmer
yeah,
a little bit.
that makes
And
sense.
I detail that elsewhere. And so the story maker correlates somewhat with the Celtic weave. Okay, because that's the system that weaves things together to create meaning. And I talk about that in the book. I make that correlation in the book. However, there's other aspects of Donna's work that are part of Storymaker. Your grid, your basic grid, lays down, it's like your soul comes in, it lays down an energy grid that is the interface between the soul and what this life is going to be. This particular life. Well, their story maker capacities, your gifts are coded into that grid. It's almost like a guitar or a harp where you lay the strings down and then they have to be tuned to play your particular key and music, etc.
Mm,
So that is story maker kind of correlates with some grid and minor grid um, aspects. And so they come up in the book. I have something called a body weave that isn't grid repair, but it certainly is grid tuning. It certainly helps with those deeper um, energy systems that Donna teaches about. So those are the major ones: the Celtic weave and the grid and minor grid. I'm trying to think. The electrics have a little bit to do with Storymaker, that on-off switching of communication. Um, yeah, those are the major
mm,
ones, but it's not one to one.
yeah.
And I think that, at the beginning of the book I say, if you're the kind of person that reads this and you're correlating it with everything you've ever studied, trying to say, how does this fit into this? And how does this fit into this? Take a step back. And that's fine. I mean, we all do it and it's how we learn. And I think it's wonderful. But if you take a step back and say, how do these concepts correlate with my lived experience? Are they useful to me as a way of understanding my lived
Mm.
experience?
Yes.
I think that's something that I love about my counsels and my inner teachers for me is that they put it in everyday non-technical language that I can sort of assess. Is this true for me? Do I have a part of me that's making the stories and a part of me that's guarding the stories and a part of me that's juicing the stories? And if I know that I have those three parts, I can say, what's going wrong here? Is it not enough juice? Is it not very skillful story making? Or is my gatekeeper running amok and guarding something that doesn't need to be guarded because I should have discarded it
Mm.
many years ago?
Mm.
So I find it a very pragmatic configuration. And for some people, and that's why there's lots of stories in the book, because I think we really can resonate with stories and say, "Oh yeah, I'm not like her in some ways, but in other ways I'm just like her." So I really get what this energy concept is relative to my experience. I want people to be selfish when they read the book. Even if they're working with clients and they want to apply it to their clients, I want readers to selfishly say, "How does this help me deepen my understanding of body, mind, spirit, and what this enterprise is that we call being human or being in body or whatever." So it does very much relate to Donna's teachings, but Donna's teachings are very much aimed at, the ones we studied, aimed at training practitioners to work with clients to do specific kinds of healing, particularly related to illnesses even. And this is a slightly and it fits with what I'm teaching, but what I'm teaching applies to the whole question of how do I create a self
Mm.
and
Mm.
how do I cultivate that self, take care of it, and evolve it in these particular times.
Yeah.
And I want to say one thing about the book that you didn't ask, but you might. Maybe I'm going to jump ahead. When I set out to write this book at the request of my counsels, my inner teachers, there were two kinds of topics that I wanted to explore together. The first is, how can we address the overwhelm that our subtle energy systems are going through because of the onslaught of communications, of digital media, of 24/7 stuff coming at us. And I can see and I can experience that all that information, all that communication befuddles our body's ability to communicate with itself. And the body is a big communication system. Whether you think it's chemical communications or energy communications, it's a huge communication system. So, how is that affected by all this incoming? And there's tons of it, right? And way more than there used to be. 150 years ago, we weren't living, you know, f- four TV shows a night and all the emails and all the texts and all the news flashes and stuff. We weren't living so many stories. We didn't know what was happening on the other side of the planet. We weren't feeling for all these people in the midst of war when we weren't in war. And now we're being asked to somehow take awareness of this larger world of events and communications and creativity and creation and destruction and all of it, and somehow digest it. And so I think I was doing a very bad job. My whole digestive system went out. It's like, whoa, my stomach stopped working. And I thought, what is this? And I realized, okay, my story maker had gotten broken or sprained or disturbed,
Overwhelmed. Hmm.
overwhelmed by the incoming. And so I thought we need some better information on how do we take care of this story maker and evolve it for the massive change we're all going through very rapidly with how things are done and how things aren't done and what's being destroyed and what's being you know not being destroyed, and where we're coming from as human beings and where do we want to come from. And that's why I start with this a little story about artificial intelligence, because it's kind of like, do I really trust Silicon Valley tech bros to to tell me how to think. When I think with my heart and I think with my gut and I think with my soul. And somehow I just don't trust them to like autopilot my brain yet. And maybe there's others who do, and I'm glossing over lots of cool stuff, but there you go. That's how I was feeling. So that's number 1, is what do we do with what's happening to our story makers because of the overwhelm? The other thing that's happening that you'll hear all kinds of spiritual people talk about is there's a great awakening happening. And my teachers have talked about it for 20 years, that we are wakening waking up from inside, and something is rising. Awareness, consciousness. We're being asked to evolve and grow. And that's been sort of the topic of my training with my teachers for 50 years, is how to awaken and how do you evolve consciousness, and what is consciousness, not as an abstract but as a very embodied thing of how does this soul and this body and this mind, how do they work as a committee in an integrated way. And so that's the material that I've been blessed to bring through. So there is that theme going through of, okay, yes, we've got this overwhelm, and how do we work with it? But also, how do we work with, we're just as overwhelmed from the inside in a way. It's like when the plant comes up and breaks the soil and breaks the surface and even breaks cement if it has to get to the light. We have this light rising in each of us. And so I just wanted to share some of the tools I've been given over the 50 years to work with that stuff in a kind of fun everyday way. Because for some people, lots of spiritual teachings are just too abstract. They're too out there. And we can't make the connection between this very cool out there spiritual teaching and how do I make a good decision about which contractor to use to fix my kitchen. Those kind of everyday,
Yeah.
okay, I'm giving myself away. Those everyday decisions. So those two things weave in and out in the book. And I think that that's the context in which all this story maker, gatekeeper, radiance stuff is being placed in
Mm.
this book.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, and it's a lot for us to deal with and handle in this world. And so having this guidebook is very helpful. I just want to read on just right at the beginning, page 4. It is tempting to want to withdraw from the world, go back to a mythical, better past, or jump in with crusading verve to save the planet. So for me, it's that withdrawal piece of like, it's so overwhelming. Um,
Uh,
and so I really like how you break things down and give us ways that we can work with this. So I have a couple, they're not really technical, but a little technical before we get into, I have
okay,
lots of questions about the story maker, but I want to ask a
good.
couple questions that aren't about that first before we dive in. We'll just clear those out of the way first. And this
Okay.
is me just close reading of the text, right? So it
I
may
love
not.
that about you.
That's good because it may not be like a huge piece, but it catches me, right? So you write here, as far as I know, wars have not been fought over our inner teachers, our individual sources of inspiration and soul juice. And I really, that stopped me because I feel like wars have been fought about that. There have been massive moves to silence people, to scare people away from, believing in their own selves. Even the advent of organized religion was all about taking your ability to interact with God, however you translate God, away from you individually and making it only to be done in very circumscribed circumstances. And even burning women at the stake for being witches, for
Mhm.
having these internal ideas about herbalism or healing, anything like that other people didn't understand. Then so I feel like there was silencing. Wars have been fought over our inner
Oh,
teachers.
yeah.
So maybe could you speak a little bit more about why you said, as far as wars have not been? That
Yeah.
just, yeah, what do you
Yeah.
think?
Okay. Because I was thinking about people who start wars. Um, and I was, so what you're talking about, those wars you're talking about is from the outside in, people trying to suppress the the rise of consciousness. But I was thinking in terms of, there's been wars over Christianity, there's been wars over Islam, there's been wars over configurations, spiritual configurations. I don't think there's been as many wars about Buddhism, because Buddhism was very much about an awakening practice. So, you're taking it much more sophisticated than I was. I was just thinking, I don't think that anyone said, I want to awaken and I'm going to kill anyone who doesn't allow awakening. I mean, the wars have come in the other direction to quash awakening.
Yeah.
But I couldn't think of examples of people where we are going to war to force people to awaken.
Mm, mm.
It's always the other way. It's that
Yes.
patriarchal kill awakening, kill not kill knowing, kill knowledge.
Yes.
Go back to the rules that are imposed outside in.
Yeah.
And so, really, what I was saying is, I don't think that if you work from the inside out, you're as likely to take it to a warlike stance. It's an affirmative stance. It's a birthing
Mm,
stance.
mm.
And maybe mothers have gone to war to save their children or to give birth, but I don't think so. I think it's in a way an individual act of creativity, and the collective of individuals giving birth has something to teach us that's different from the wars being taught for ideas or imposition from the outside in.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
but again,
Yeah.
maybe, that's why I said as far as I know, because those are all good examples,
Yeah.
but they weren't wars started by the witches. They weren't
Right.
wars starting by the awakeners. They were wars by the people who wanted to hold on to power
Yeah.
and impose a view that was non-awakening.
Yeah.
Who take the word awakened and call it woke and say it's a
Mhm.
bad thing.
Right. Yeah.
That's where the war's coming from, not from the people trying to awaken. Even
Yes.
if some of us get kind of strong about our affirmation, it doesn't have to be all flowers and clouds. You can, to give birth, there is a push there.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, that push didn't lead to wars the way the suppression of birthing
Yeah.
new vision has led to wars.
Yeah.
So maybe we're saying the same thing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
different
Yeah. I think
different
so. I
directions.
think so. And so that leads me to another thing because you talked about the outside, the inside out thinking versus the outside in thinking. So
Mhm.
you said you right here. I believe we are collectively in a transition from a world rooted in outside in thinking to a world where we live more comfortably from the inside out. And so I don't mean to be picayune here, but I these really just sparked questions for me. So I agree, we're
Mhm.
living more comfortably from the inside out, trusting ourselves. Intuition is all of the sudden in the last, decade or two a big thing, whereas before no one ever talked about it. So all of these ideas. And what do you think about the antenna theory? Which is just for those listeners that don't know that we are the mind is an antenna and that we are tuning in to our very essence of who we are. And that's how we download. I know you don't like that word, but that's how we gather in that information, and we're literally antennas every on all of the cell walls. There's little antennas that are picking up vibrational information. And so do you like, how do you put those two together, or do you not agree or think that we are antennas but that it's all emerging from within? So how do those two come together?
Uh-huh. Well, it's interesting. I told a story in the book about two different spiritual teachers, one of whom was sort of waking people up more or less from the inside, and another who was sort of explaining this theory of all the knowledge comes to us and we take it in from outside. And I just said, from how I've been taught from my teachers and my own perception of where it comes from, I think it comes up through the core. And the other day, my teachers came in and they said, your bones are an antenna and they're there to pick up, the information. And I'm working with that. That's for another book. But that notion that the information comes from the outside in is so much our socialized thinking in our culture that everything comes to us from outside and then we internalize it. If you see the antenna as being your spine, and then going out. These are, these belong to my spine. They're extensions of my spine, but they are my arms. I'm waving my arms for those of you listening to me. I'm waving my arms are an extension out from my spine. They're hooked in, there's the nerves that feed my arms are hooked into the spine, but the nerve center isn't my fingertips. The nerve center is in my spine. So for me, I've always seen the receiver, the antenna, the core of it is the spine as and the grid which sits along the spine, and that all the things that reach out, the arms and the mind and all the things that go out there to pick up stuff, we're picking up the emanations from other people's knowledge centers and knowing and spines, but that often we haven't been taught to activate our own and use it as an antenna. And so inside and out, again, I don't want to get too metaphysical. Those are concepts of our three-dimensional brain, what's inside, what's out. And so I don't want to get too technical. Where does it come from? But for me, what I find in terms of personal evolution is that if you see your spine as like my teachers called it the baton of the self, that the spine is where you carry your selfhood that gets expressed through the nerve system, sends out to all the everything to the brain and everything, and it's the central communication pathway for everything in the body, but it's also a central communication pathway for the spirit and for the mind. And so when our mind is centered in the spine, it's very hard to be influenced in a bad way by other people. That I know it in my bones.
Mm-hmm.
That saying, I know it in my bones, that grandmas often say. Well, why? Because a lot when you can center your knowing in the instrument that you are, you do have access to all the cosmos for sure. And in fact, I teach in one of my classes in energy Cairo, I teach about energy doorways in the spine, the different dimensions of the cosmic blah blah blah, right? I teach that, but it comes back to the spine, and you don't need to know the doorways to know that, wow, this is a really powerful center of knowing, and if I work from there, I'm centered. If
Mm.
I work from trying to take in 25 different pieces of information and synthesize them, I may or may not be incorporating my core knowing, and I may or may not be operating from the inside out. I may be operating from influence.
Mhm.
And now that influence has been amplified by digital media, and that's where we have people making really stupid choices because everybody says that's right,
Yeah.
and they don't know how to go in and hear what's true for them as a representative of their soul in this dimension.
Okay, we're gonna go down that pathway first, but I want to say one more thing about this, that maybe what I'm hearing you say, or what I'm feeling you say, actually more than hearing even, is is it possible that it's a both and scenario, that once we're anchored and
Yes,
centered in that spine, whether you call it the antenna or the baton or the torus field, the line of the torus field, that the information is flowing both ways,
oh,
so that you have
absolutely,
access to
absolutely,
everything, right? You have access to everything, but then
right.
it's interpreted through your own experience. And what you're saying is that if we spend too much time focusing on the information coming in, and we don't have anchoring within ourselves, then we can get overwhelmed. But not
Absolutely.
that everything can't be generated from within, because then, we'll have a whole other conversation about souls and where they go after death, or where they are before birth and all of that. If
Yeah,
it's just in the
yeah,
physical form, that doesn't leave room for the energy of the soul, which many people believe continues on after the body expires. If it's all coming from within
right.
and the body expires, that means it's all over when the body is gone, right?
Well, yeah, it goes into other forms, right?
Goes.
Energy's never lost, it's just transformed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a both and, of course. When I say you have to learn how to play your instrument, it doesn't mean you can't join an orchestra and
Yeah.
make amazing music. It's just that if I join the orchestra and I'm a violin and I think I'm a flute, I'm not going to play very good music. And if I can't play the violin because I'm watching the flutes trying to emulate them, then I really don't play my instrument.
Yeah.
So it is about sort of agency and becoming an instrument and knowing your instrument so that you do have the ability to contribute your best to the collective. not just pile on to opinions and pile on to thought forms and pile on to politics and pile on to trends. And, I think that we we can each be creators. And I think there's a trend right now to that word creators came up in the last 10-15 years as a thing, because we are awakening to the fact that we each are a soul creating a self, creating identity, creating storylines, and co creating. My story intersperses with yours. We've known each other many, many, many years, and our stories weave together. And, when I look at my story, I'm grateful for the Lauren threads that are in my story, because they're important threads, and the Donna Eden threads. And, even the people I don't know, some of these people listening, are threads in my story that make it richer.
Mm,
So it's
mm,
not that it's all coming from inside. It's that if we can't be centered in the self, well, you're not going to center in myself,
yeah.
and Joe Schmo isn't going to center in myself. So I'm losing the opportunity to really know how to play this instrument and make a real contribution.
I love that. That
So it's
is,
not a political
yeah.
stance, it's
No.
more a pragmatic of how do you work with energy?
Yeah.
Well, if it's all this abstract science thing out there, you don't. But if it becomes, well, what happens when I take a breath? What happens when I lean over? What happens when I rub here? When it becomes a kind of question of how do I work with this instrument? How do I become more skilled at playing the music of my soul on this instrument? First of all, it's more fun
Yeah.
because you do have a personal stake in that. But second of all, you start to bring much better music into our shared space, and life gets nicer, more fun, more celebratory,
Yeah.
and there's more radiance for us all to share. So that's it. It's not inside versus
Yeah.
outside. It's
Yeah.
that a shift from outside in thinking, that wars are about imposing our will, to saying, well, I don't need to make a war if I'm so satisfied expressing what I have to bring that I'm actually coordinating with others rather than trying to play over them and
Mm,
drown them out.
yeah. Oh, beautiful. That's beautiful. Play over them and drown them out. There's a lot of that going on for sure. Um, okay,
Absolutely.
so now we're diving into the storyteller, and I've got lots of, you've got lots of quotes that I've outlined here, but
Good.
I want to start maybe with the most difficult that comes up for me often when I'm thinking about the storyteller, the story maker, the creation of self. Even in the end of the book, you've got some energy testing techniques. What comes up for me so quickly, and I think for so many, and I think you guide us there, even if it unconsciously, the way you begin the book, is we tell ourselves, and you talk about this several times in different places in the book, so I just want to tie it all together and go deep right away. We have the largest propensity to, and we are so easily as humans brainwashed. There are cults, there are belief systems, there are negative belief systems. And I've asked this about to many teachers in the over the years in the Eden world. We energy test and the body never lies, right? There's that big story that we all say the body never lies, so you can energy test because the body never lies, even if the mind lies. But what if you believe something so deeply, again, in that cultish way, but even if it's just about yourself? Like I've had, no longer because of the work I've done, but I've had for decades horrible, deep rooted beliefs about myself that you could not convince me otherwise, that was
Hmm.
my truth, and that became the lived story that I told the world, that I told myself. And if you had energy tested me and to any of those beliefs, I guarantee you I would have tested
Yeah.
strong. So we have
Okay.
this story maker, and you're going to teach us now. You're going to tell us about how we can, access these beautiful things and play together in symphony and play our own. But what if our beliefs are been so crushed, or we have been, you know, inculcated? I don't. Is that word about being taken into a cult? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of that behavior in the world where we really the
Yes.
belief systems, and I believe it so strongly, and there's the war. I want to make you believe
Right.
it because that's how strongly I believe it, even though we know that that is because I
Right.
don't really believe it that strongly. So I just asked you a
Right.
bunch of things.
Right.
It's a big knot. Can you
Right.
help us sort it out?
Oh, gosh, yes, that is such a good question. I love that question. Okay, let's start with your statement, the body doesn't lie. Oh, sure, the body lies all the time. I mean, anyone who's sat by a piece of chocolate and their body's saying, yes, I need this chocolate and I need it right now. In fact, I need two or three of them. I really do.
But
And
isn't
I
that
need
the
the sugar.
mind? That's the
And
mind saying that I need the
well,
chocolate.
it's also the body. You can energy test and the body will say, yeah, chocolate, this is good for me. I mean, energy testing, I teach it differently. Um, and people have flattened it out to yes no answers. You do an energy test and you're getting a yes or a no from the body, and the body doesn't lie, so it's a truth detector. No, no. You're taking a sampling, you're taking a sounding of what your body and your story maker believe in that moment to be the truth, and it causes energy to flow or not flow. So you're just taking a sounding of what happens to your energies in the presence of that question. And it's not even weak and strong. It's even, wobbly versus solid versus too solid. It's flowing versus projecting. It's, when you can do energy testing and use it to take a sampling to feel the energy and see it as an amplification of an energetic conversation rather than a yes no lie detector truth detector. First of all, you're doing better energy testing. I mean, that's, people who are artists at energy testing know that. People who take a little weekend class go around with their yes no right answer machine, and it's a little like a lie detector. Lie detectors can detect lies, but if you truly believe it, they're detecting that as a truth, because you know
Yes.
that your whole body lives your story.
Hmm.
And if your story is firmly entrenched, there's your body living your story. So in this book, I talk a little about the difference between a narrative story, like he does this and she does that, and here's the details of the story, and we believe these firmly. I read it in 20 places, it's got to be true, kind of thing. That's a narrative. But beneath the narrative is an energy story. So the energy story may be, I'm feeling disconnected. The energy story may be anger or vindictiveness. I mean, sometimes these narratives are power over, about I need to dominate because I need to be right, because I'm losing my power, because I used to get power from the patriarchy, and the patriarchy is morphine. Let's say that nicely. I'd like to say dying, but let's call it morphine. So so when we can get to the energy story, we can begin to work with it and transform the energies. So it's not so much about the beliefs play a role in this. And I do address this in the book about beliefs, but because we're most of us were raised in an outside in kind of culture where we go to school and they try to pour knowledge into us. They aren't even giving us things to generate and create our own knowledge. They're telling us this is this truth and this is this truth and this is this historical fact and and now there's wars over what are we going to pour into the kids. And as an educator, I was trained as an educator back in the day, and I was very much about generative education, where the kids do activities and they distill their own learning and knowing from their own experience. So even in that realm, I'm very much inside out in my personal preferences. But so so when we are full of these beliefs, the story maker has been programmed, and it is programmable. Both the gatekeeper and the story maker are programmable to a certain extent, and then they program us. So the gatekeeper and the story maker work together to make me want chocolate every time I feel insecure, because they wrongly think that's going to make me feel better. And turns out that's not true. It never was true, but at one point that got put into the archives for the autopilot to say, okay, whenever you feel insecure, chocolate would be a good idea. And many of us have these I call them templates. So in the book, I teach people to take soundings, not look for right answers, to see what information you can get in the whole language of energy, not just knowing from your brain up, but in the whole language of perceiving, feeling, sensing, touching, tasting, smelling, hearing, knowing, all the ways we get information and communicate it within ourselves. How can you take soundings throughout your being to find out what feels true throughout your being? And also, when you are connected to your core and to your inner guidance, often your inner guidance will say, well, actually, you carry that belief. That's not quite true. And begin to give you evidence in your experience to show you, well, actually, that's not really true, is it? Or it's only true in this situation, but not in every situation. And so I give techniques for how to erase or heal and transform these templates of experience that you're calling beliefs that keep us doing the same thing over and over, whether or not it's true. And if someone, has bought into a cult, they're probably not going to read my book. But if they do, I've got techniques there for them to not deprogram themselves, but for them to actually figure out how to ask inward to find out to what extent is that true for me, and to what extent does that not work, and to go to all the dimensions of our being, their being, to get that information. And when you start that kind of inquiry, you get different answers than what the trained brain has learned to think. So I differentiate in the book between what the trained brain does and what our knowing, our inner knowing, can guide us to. And so I only added energy testing at the very end as an appendix for a few techniques where it's helpful to test a kind of flow not flow thing. But I say throughout the book that it's a very poor tool. You wouldn't climb a mountain to see the wise guru in the cave and say to him, okay, I'm going to ask you questions, but you can only answer yes or no. And I want to know all about the wisdom of the universe, but you can only answer yes and no. We wouldn't do that. So when we do that to our bodies with energy testing, we're really abandoning our ability to get information in many, many, many rich ways right here through this instrument. And it doesn't take years of specialized training. You can read my book and never do any Eden training and still learn to communicate with your body, with your instrument, with your story maker. And I feel we all need that, and then we should all go do some training and become skilled in other things. But I think it's a baseline communication to learn to communicate with your own being, since it is a communication system.
Mm, mm, mm.
Was that too much?
No, 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 no. I'm just trying to think of which thread I want to pluck on to get more of. The one thread that troubles me with the work that I do, the work that you do. I asked a similar question to Dawson with the work that he does, and you said it right there. If somebody's in a cult, they're unlikely to pick up your book. And so my question sort of is not that your goal with this book is, well, I'm not going to put words into what your goal with this book is. My hopes, is always grandiose, coming right from Donna too, like change the world, right? Her is change the world one
Right.
energy at a time. And so the energies that need to be changed the most, that are in the most, let's just say, trouble, because you said, the patriarchy morphing, which I do like more. It can't die. We need pater, we need mater and pater, we need them both.
Right.
We need the divine
Right.
union. So that's really, so
Right.
that's what the morphing that I would like to see happen, not the death of anything. There's, I mean, in the natural
Hmm.
flow, the death, but not the death of anything. We need the divine union to come together, and everyone, the archetypes, to be truly honored, not bastardized and twisted for people's personal use. But so the people that I believe need this work to transform their storytelling, like you just said, are unlikely to find
Hmm.
this work. So how do we expand this beyond preaching to the choir? Or do we just do the
Uh-huh.
work and trust that it will get to the people it needs to get to, and we just stay in our lane and do our work? Is that what you would think?
Well, the way I see it is that this isn't about preaching to any choir. This is about getting other people who want to play their instruments to come together and make some beautiful music together. And the people who won't read my book will hear that music. They will meet someone who has come home to their soul, and they found their kindness, and they found their spirit, and they found their truth, and they don't have to start a war over it, and they don't have to evangelize about it. They just emanate that note, that truth, and that is appealing to someone who maybe is in a cult, but feeling that the cult isn't really loving or kind, or feeling like they are being asked to do things that aren't quite 100% comfortable. And, I think about Donna Eden, who's a wonderful role model for all of us, because often, even when she can't find words, her energy wakes us up. It communicates joy and radiance. I mean, she's a little radiant bunny, right? So, and she brings a lot of that in, and people resonate with it even if they don't know what the heck she's talking about. And I would like to be that kind of person that, even if I don't say a word about the work I do or the woo woo stuff I might believe or all these concepts, that my essence is going to reach out to someone and touch a chord in them and awaken something in them. And awakening, people are saying politically that, courage is contagious. I think awakening is contagious. And I feel that, even the choir can use some help in how do I get my voice working even better to express this music. I mean, you never stop learning. I went to a concert of 100 fiddlers the other night. It was this amazing group of young people, old people of all ages, all playing fiddles, except for there were a few cellos and a few other instruments, but mostly fiddles. And it was sort of the Scottish tradition, and they were all playing by ear. No one had printed music because they had met in community again and again to fiddle, to play around, to explore. And the name of the group means meander or wander, because it was about wandering through a field of celebration and sharing, and this sort of I can't remember the Scottish word. I think it was Keeley or Kaylee. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that kind of gathering of joyous sharing that creates, in some traditions, a cone of power, a cone of celebration. And so all of these fiddlers of all different abilities were playing this amazing, joyous sound that got the audience feeling like we were part of it. And it's not because they were proselytizing or trying to convince us we should all learn the fiddle, although I was tempted to go join them, take my violin and join them. But it was because they were celebrating something that I wanted some of too.
Mm.
And I think that's a perfect example for, I don't need to go out and preach. If I tell some really good stories, somebody's going to say, "Hey, you may not like the energy medicine in this book, but there's some really interesting stories. Let me read you one." And so my book is written both through stories, and then I've got exercises and activities for people who want to learn it a little more formally. But you can also learn from the stories that, like Buddhists teach through stories, through koans and stuff. So, because it's called Your Body Lives Your Story, I felt, well, I've got to put some really good stories in here. So I kind of pulled out some of my best stories to share because I feel they're emblematic of the kinds of truths that we can find when we dig into our own stories. And so everybody's got stories, and some people, their stories are being so suppressed that they're repeating sort of a group think story. But there's some part of them that wants their own story heard, maybe with their best friend, maybe with the one person they confide in, maybe they talk to their dog. And so for anyone who's yearning to tell their story, to hear their story and know it better, that's going to awaken something in them to look a little further, look a little deeper, to try some things, to play. And my work is all about playing with this stuff. I call it my work, I should call it my play, but it is about not developing this serious power tool kind of kit. It is about, if I want to accomplish something, what are some of the things I can use to play with it and see where it gets me. And it may not get me where I think I want to go, but this is the territory I want to explore. And so that's very much my work, very much sort of identifies territory. And then role models. Well, how do we explore this using what we have at hand? You don't need to buy a machine. You don't need to use special chemicals. What we have at hand, how can we explore what we can do with it for the betterment of our body, mind, and spirit? So, I mean, at this
There's
point, the book just sounds like it's way too chock full and overwhelming, but it's got layers. It's like a poem in that I put layers in. You can read it different ways depending on your inclination.
Well, it's interesting that you said that. It is chock full, and I am going to use your word because I felt it myself a few times. This is overwhelming. There's so many techniques here. And so I followed your guidance in the book. You said there's ways to read it. You can go front to back as like you would read a novel, or you can dip in and out. And I tried many of those different ways. And I was like, oh, there's too much. I can't do anything. And then I thought, well, let me just flip open and see. And there were some things that were going on for me. And I was like, what do I do about that? And it wasn't even, let me go pick up your book. I was like, well, I'm going to just forget about that because now I'm going to read Ellen's book because I'm going to interview her. And I just, flipped to where I was and wow, let me try that exercise. I've never even seen that exercise before. And I tried it. I was like, that's amazing. And I had this really beautiful and deep experience with this very simple technique that I'd never heard of before or seen before. And I was it felt very joyful to do that. And so I think, you say it at the beginning and you say it at the end, because at the end, so you've got two stories there. One friend is like, I don't want to read any of this. I'm glad you wrote a book. Good for you, but just fix me, right? So there's that person. And then there's the friend that's like, this is great and overwhelming. How should I start? And you're almost a little coy. You're like, I don't really want to tell you how. It's not a recipe. It's not a diatribe. It's an exploration. And so, but then you break down at the end. You're like, okay, I'll give you an idea of how you could do it if you wanted to kind of create a technique or a daily practice or something. But I really encourage you to dip in and out. So you sort of play both sides of that, not wanting to make anything concrete, which I appreciate because you're talking about energy. And so you're saying that we don't need to have this. It's not like brushing your teeth that you do just twice a day, whether you think about it or not. That's not the relationship that you're encouraging us to have with our energy, which I really appreciated. And one other thing I want to say about the story maker, why it felt and feels and is so powerful, and why I think the book ultimately isn't overwhelming, but is affirming. She who controls the narrative controls everything. Everything is about story.
Mm-hmm.
Every
Yes.
choice that you make, every politician you vote or don't vote for, every movement you become a part of or not a part of, everything is about story. And when there are transformations in our cultures, in our worlds, it happens because the stories behind them are so powerful. We cannot and do not want to turn away, and we do not want to continue to have the old story. We're ready for these new stories of freedom and equality and enlightenment and co-creation and regeneration. And these, you can say all those words, but each one of them starts with a story. Regenerative agriculture. It starts with, here's a piece of dead land. And here's a piece of land full of creatures and bloomings, and you tell that story of how it happened. And by the end of the story, you've got all of these farmers saying, this is what I want, right? So you
Right.
really are bringing one of, if not the most powerful construct of the human mind into play here in this book. And I feel very grateful for it. And ultimately, I did not feel overwhelmed. As I said, I felt inspired. I want to read two other pieces, and then I want to turn it over to you to kind of close it out with what your hopes and goals are for this. These are on 2 pages here, right back to back, that I just loved. Enlightenment means turning the light on inside you, which helps you see the light in all of life. We don't think about that much, but I think enlightenment means turning the light on inside you, which helps you see the light in all of life. So beautiful. And then you even say, to me, it comes down to this. What beliefs help you get nourished and bring you home to your inner truth? What beliefs help you get nourished? And we know that those false beliefs do not nourish us, even though they have got their hooks in us. That word, they do not nourish us. So, what beliefs help you get nourished and bring you home to your inner truth? So beautiful. Those are two just little gems that I keep circling with. So, I thank you so much for this book, and just want to ask you how you would what you want to say to wrap this up for everyone who's just been listening and it's so enjoying how you're sharing this.
Wow. Well, I guess what I want to say is I would love to have people read the book. Absolutely. And share it with people who could benefit from it. Absolutely. But if you're not going to buy the book, you can ask yourself, what is my story maker? And how can I cultivate a relationship with the part of me that creates meaning? And the story maker doesn't just create meaning, it discerns meaning. But often we try to discern meaning rather than creating it. And I think that's backwards. I think we should create meaning and then discern if people agree with us. Like when you write papers in college and they want you to quote all these dead men before you can have an idea. And I was always backwards, like, no, let me say my idea and I'll say who agrees with me about it, who's famous and dead, right? And it's it's just a different way of approaching. So I guess I would encourage people to play with their own inner knowing, their own consciousness. If they want to pick up the book, you don't have to take it all in. You can read it. Someone said the other day she reads a page or two a night, and then she maybe tries an exercise, and then she goes to sleep, and so it's taking her months to read the book. Well, that's good value. You didn't pay that much for a lot of entertainment, and I'm happy with that. So my goal, because I'm turning 70 next month, is to codify. I've been in practice for 40 years. Oh yes, 70. Yay.
Yay.
I've been in practice for 40 years. I've been working with my inner teachers for 50. And my goal in this phase of my life is, can I codify what I've learned in this realm of healing and guidance and teaching and knowing and working with this instrument, which was not a given for me. I just thought the body was a very foreign concept for many years. And it took me a long time to really understand my instrument. And so I want to codify it and make it available in as inexpensive a way and as accessible a way as possible. And for me, I love stories. I mean, put me with a pile of junk novels and I am happy. Maybe that's the meaning of life for me. I love, they don't even have to be high literature, though I love that too. I love story. And so in this one, because I know that our body lives whatever story is framing it, I wanted to show how that works. So people had a little more choice about not just which story they're choosing, but which story they're crafting. And is that the story they want to be crafting by their beliefs, by their moments, by their actions, by their choices, by their affiliations, and by the energies they call in? And again, it's not about what political thing you think, but what's the energy behind it? Is it kindness? Is it support for humanity? Is it power over and domination? Is it, macho manliness? Whatever the energy is, that's the story. And so we need to get behind all these thoughts and feelings and beliefs and opinions to what energies can I embody and how can I do them artfully, because I think artistry is what makes life interesting. So how can I do that? And maybe I'm going on and on, but yeah, I want people to buy my book. I really do, because I think it's got material that can be helpful. And I just wouldn't mind if the whole choir bought a copy and then shared it with their clients and their friends and their family. Not the book so much as what they get from it. You don't have to quote me. Whatever you get from the book and share it, that's yours. Take it out and, you know, use it to make a better regenerative agri field, a field that grows vegetables in a better way. So
You
I
know,
don't know if
your
that said it,
subtitle
but
here is Energy Medicine to Heal Your Story Maker. And one of the things you just said, which is so powerful, and you've said it a few times, that, your body lives your story. And I think for a lot of people that might not be in our pocket here, right? We're not, right, not in the energy world, but that recognize that, I mean, you know, a lot of people are quite ill in their physical bodies. And there is still this wild, to me, disconnect between the stories that we have lived and that tell ourselves and our belief systems and our illness and disease patterns that are
Yes.
simply just a step down energetically from, it starts there's, I'm going to say the outside in again, but like it starts with the very fine diffuse, and then it gets more and more solid until it's into the physical body. And if your beliefs, which are in that finer and diffuse, more diffuse place, if those stay and they're not healthy and they're not nourishing you and they're not serving you, then ultimately they get stepped down and they start to destroy you from within on a physical level. So
Right.
there's, I
Right.
mean, this is the reality as you and I know it, and it's the reality that has been known in, Chinese medicine and Ayurveda for 5,000 plus years. It's not something that's accepted so much in the Western world, the patriarchal world that you've talked about. Hopefully, part of the morphing will be a greater connection with that. It feels very far off right now. I just had someone in my world go through an open heart surgery, and they're the doctors were like, it doesn't matter what you eat, which is, that's not even energy work. That, like, doesn't matter what you eat. And then breathing practices, no, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about how you breathe, right? And so I'm just thinking, like, wow, that's a story. That's an erroneous story that is,
Right.
that has a lot of impact, that's not very healthy. Um,
Right.
Donna Eden has a quote on the cover of your book. This is a book that can change your life. I would agree with Donna. And I would say that I feel about this book similarly to I feel about Donna's books, which I have them on my bookshelves, and they're often found beside my bed or in my study pile. They cycle back and forth many times. They are also, I've got little sticky notes through all of them and highlights throughout the whole thing. This, I feel, is a book for life, not a book to just read on the beach, although that's a perfect place to start it. But this is a book that I know myself because there are so many things in here that I've not seen before that I'm curious to come back to read the technique and then to practice the technique. There's beautiful illustrations. One of my favorites is on page 81, where the wings come out. I that's the illustration is gorgeous. The practice is gorgeous. We are angels. We have that within us. And I love, it's just beautiful, Ellen. It's such a beautiful book. I hope that everyone listening buys a copy of this and does these practices. It's really a joy, and it's a joy, the joy of speaking with you, and your depth of wisdom and knowledge and joy come through in this writing 100%.
Oh, thank you. You're so sweet. I really appreciate it. And I mean, I appreciate you. And, I love speaking with you because I truly love and appreciate your work as well. And I feel like we're in it. We're in a team together. And, we're tag teaming, you and me and a bunch of others. And it's not about trying to convince people of a certain message. It's about trying to give people permission to join the team and fiddle, to actually join in and be part of a joyous celebration like the 100 Fiddlers. So, anyway, thank you for your kind words about my book. And I'm particularly loving the cover because it's my favorite color and I like the image so much on it. It's like, oh, you could get it for the picture because it's so nice. But in fact, I tried to write good stuff inside it too.
It's beautiful, and I love that. Thank you for that invitation, and I think that is a wonderful note to end on. Is that your work and mine and Donna's and all of us in this field? It is an open invitation to pick up your instrument and come to the party. And so that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you for that invitation. Thank you for this book. I'm already looking forward to, the next practice and technique and the learnings that I'm going to glean from this. So thank you, and thank you for being on my podcast. It's so great to speak with you always.
Oh, thank you.